Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't beat that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
How we doing, analysts? Jason Elder here with a very special LEA podcast deep dive. I want to welcome back to the podcast Sean Bair, the entrepreneur, to find out what he's been up to since he was on the show and what advice he has for our listeners. Sean Bair, how we doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me back, and I'm excited to chat with you over the next little bit here. And you introduced me as an entrepreneur. I'll take that badge, but I miss you saying crime analyst. So we'll maybe try and work that in toward the end.
Yeah. Well, we can certainly talk some crime analysis as well. So we got a lot of topics to talk about because I want to pick your brain about artificial intelligence, about analyst role going forward with AI. So there's a lot to go over. A lot has happened in the last 5 years since we last spoke. So
my goodness. Yeah, wow. Now that you say that, AI wasn't even a thing commercially 5 years ago. So we do have a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, no, it seemed science fiction until it wasn't science fiction.
Yeah, and now we're trying to catch up.
All right, so co-founded a new company, SwornAI, to work with first responders on, it's a well and health platform. So get into that, how you got into that and where it is today.
Okay, so SwornAI, obviously the word sworn should be familiar to your listeners. 3 friends and a lot of partners actually were doing some consulting work for the Detroit Police Department, helping them with various administrative things. And what they discovered in doing that is that there was an immense need for somebody to finally pay attention to the blight that is officer health, both mental health, but also physical health and emotional health and on all sort of aspects of that. And they came across some alarming numbers that the average age or life expectancy of a police officer is age 57. Now I'm 55, so that doesn't compute for me. Yeah. And that they have 5 times the heart attacks that the national average is. It's an epidemic, basically. So it's a very stressful job, as your listeners know, not only for an officer, but everybody who works in public safety who they might not have hands-on cuffs, but they read the reports and the dispatchers hear what's going on. And so everybody is impacted by it, by the stress, by the intensity of that profession, albeit such a noble one. And so they started to see that needed a solution. They were doing some things and trying to come up with ways that they could help the department and then public safety as a whole to just get a handle on it, to understand how we can make them live longer and have happier and healthier lives and lower the divorce rate and all the things that come with it, lower the drinking rate. And so they started to envision that a piece of technology was probably going to be in play, that it was moving for that. And so one of the co-founders of Sworn, interestingly enough, in small world, Adam Safer. Adam Safer is the son of Howard Safer. The Safer's got a great name in public safety. Howard Safer was the former NYPD and New York Fire Department commissioner back in the day, has since passed on. And he was on the board of directors of LexisNexis. Sort of a roundabout way through LexisNexis, I got to know Howard Safer, but also during the acquisition of Bair Analytics, I got to know Adam Safer because he was contracted by LexisNexis to help do the due diligence on Bair Analytics. So Adam was the guy who was going out there asking all of our customers without me knowing about it, hey, are these Bair people legit? Is this, come on, what's going on here? And do net promoter score and do all the things that Adam is brilliant at and capable of doing. And so he reported back to LexisNexis and said, hey, thumbs up, everybody's pretty happy with them and you should move forward. So long story short, what happened was when they were now trying to figure out this tech piece, they thought, well, I know this guy. He's got some background in law enforcement tech. So Adam reached out to me and it was at first just going to be a little, can you help us out for a little bit and maybe help direct the tech and sort of help us stand that up. So a couple months gig. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I don't think it'll be too much of a distraction for the other things I'm doing. And then the more we both, when I say both, I mean the three of them and me, got into it. And then we went into an IECP in San Diego a couple years ago. And I started seeing all the same people I'd seen for the last 20 plus years being in public safety. It was funny because we had sort of a follow-on meeting after that. And we both almost simultaneously said, you really should go full time. So I realized at that point, hey, I still am passionate about this. I want to be full on in. Let me come on board full time. And they were approaching me in that same call to ask if I would come on full time. So I joined. We're all equal partners trying to make this thing great. And here we are.
All right. So the AI piece of it, I'm on the website, I'm looking through the details of SwornAI, and obviously there's studies and research that have been done with officers over the years, but then there's just the personal aspect of it, is like what it means to the individual officer. So can you talk a little bit about like the research versus AI, and the combination of that helps fuel this tool?
Sure. And in doing so, I'll sort of describe what it is we're trying to do. But I mean, your listener is going to start to see like, oh yeah, I get what you're doing there. Oh, I've done that before. There's many aspects, as you know, and your listeners know as well. AI is just an umbrella term, artificial intelligence. And in all candor, Jason, we've been doing this for a long time. So if you go back to the early days in crime analysis, one of the very first things that I did in Attack Workstation was a neural network. So being able to reward and punish the machine learning and the algorithm based on the analyst's expert weighting and inputs. So that's artificial intelligence just in of itself. That's one component of it, neural networks. And then, of course, if you look at a police report, and one of the things we used to do is look and read the police report and try and extract out salient things from it. So because the RMS might not have it or the officer didn't enter it, you might have had to, as an analyst, as I had to do, read the report and say, okay, it was a burglary. How'd they get in? What was the point of entry? All right, well, how did they get into the point of entry? Well, they pried, they kicked, they did whatever they did, or they broke. What was the point of entry? It was a front door, it was a window. And we would extract these elements out of the police report and create structured, either an SPSS or Excel or whatever it was, and then begin to mine that using processes and different statistical tools. But that process of extracting out those elements is NLP, natural language processing. And so Attack did that back in the day too. That was one of the things. Each of these things is, of course, trying to program myself out of work or make my life easier. But one of the earlier things that we did was it could extract based on regular expressions and natural language processing context. So we would look at a sentence in a police report and see that the suspect pried open the window to gain entry. Well, they would look at that sentence and look for keywords like action verbs, pried, kicked, broke, whatever it was, and then look within context bidirectionally of that to say, oh, there's the word window, or there's the word skylight or door, and thus be able to interpret that they must have kicked the front door or pried the window or broke the window, things like that. So there's, again, artificial intelligence, natural language processing is a component of that. We were doing that too. So everybody's been doing that for a while. We're just now, it's more commercialized, these capabilities. And one of which are these large language models and being able to do things like a ChatGPT does, where it's gobbled up the internet basically, and you're able to ask questions of the internet because of these really wicked cool vectors that it's turned words into numbers and math. And we get to do things like ask a question, and it turns my question into numbers. And then it looks at the vastness of the data that it has that has also now been turned into numbers, and it matches numbers, closeness. And it says, well, you said this, that's pretty close to this. So here I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to use some natural language processing to also make it pretty and make sense. And here's that. So one of the things that Sworn does is we've also leverage large language models. So we've taken sort of the best peer-reviewed articles. We've taken the newest research on health and wellness. Again, when I say health and wellness too, I mean the wholeness of it. It's mental, it's physical, it's emotional, it's even spiritual. It's all the different things that go into making somebody a well-adjusted, happy, healthy person. And what we've done is we've been able to train the system to understand all of that documentation. Going further, what we're able to do is say, okay, agency XYZ, we have all this really rich content that'll give insights to your officers and analysts and whomever is going to use the system and how to be well and what to do based on your particular point in time or where you're at in your health journey. But we also enable the agency to upload their own information. So there's a second layer. So the first layer is the sworn layer, which is all the sort of cleaned health and wellness data and documentation that we have in our system, trained, ready to rock and roll. Then we have the middle layer, which is the agency. So the agency might have employee assistance programs, they might have wellness programs, they might have resources of phone numbers and people and specialists and whomever the department or the employee could call in need of advice or crisis or counseling. And then they can also upload things like policies and procedures and different things that are specific to the agency that would matter to that individual, that employee. And then finally, which I think is the most interesting thing, the individual can upload their own information to have the system train on it. So there's 3 layers there. So I now have the sworn layer, I have the agency layer, but then I've also uploaded things of interest to me, particular diet plans that I want to sort of follow, workout plans that I want to make sure I'm adhering to, basic medical information that is going to help it give me more accurate information back. So maybe something about my glucose levels that need to be monitored so that when it responds to me, it's taking into consideration the totality of not only my interests and my standing with my data, but the agency and as well as the sworn library database. And so that's just one aspect of it. So we do have a chat that they could ask questions of, but behind the scenes, what's happening is we've ingested other data that matters to that individual. So if it's an officer, what we've done is we've brought in CAD data. It's all right. We brought in computer-aided dispatch data. And with that, we've placed weights. Here we go with the crime analysis stuff. We've placed weights on those CAD records based on what the agency or the officer feels, because it could be fine-tuned to the officer, what they feel is the impact of that call on them. And of course, there's an element of time in that as well. So we get that. I won't get too deep in the weeds on the algorithms, but your audience is smart enough to see where we're going with this. So with that, we have the CAD data. So I know what the individual does throughout his or her day or shift. Then we also have biometrics. So we're sort of biometric agnostic. I wear an Oura ring, which tracks sleep and fitness and HRV and steps and you name it. It's connected to my Apple ecosystem, which also provides additional data, and we connect to that. So Sworn is by volunteer basis connecting to these biometric devices and being able to incorporate the biometrics along with their CAD, along with their own interest in their library, with the agency and with Sworn. And so what happens is behind the scenes, instead of it and us proactively asking, or I should say reactively asking, ChatGPT, why should I do this? How should I do this? Where should I do this? What we're doing behind the scenes is we're finding moments and opportunities to assist that individual with their health based on what we've just seen with the data. So there is, again, some it's not necessarily I would call it AI. There's a lot of math and algorithms that goes into it with some of that. But then there's also the AI aspect where it's passing the vectors to the database to retrieve back the closest responses, to be able to use other AI to cleanse and to focus the response back to that individual and to give it to him or her at the right time. I'm going to take a breath here because I've been talking a lot, but that in terms of an AI you asked about, there's a lot of different aspects that we're touching, when Sworn says we're sworn.ai, we're all in on it, and it touches every aspect of our platform.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know what the reception has been like. 'Cause the way you described it, the way the officer can volunteer the biometrics, add additional information, I instantly think of, well, there's certain people that if they're already healthy, maybe they're already tracking that, and they might be willing to go supply that information. So you're getting people that are already health conscious putting information into the system, as opposed to somebody that's not into that, maybe not into health, just starting out, may not be as open or willing to supply that information. So I'm just interested to see what the officer reaction has been to this.
It's been surprisingly receptive in that we are not getting pushback from officers saying, this is Big Brother, I don't want you having my stuff, you're going to just sell it, so on and so forth. One of our promises to our customers are that their data is anonymous. So the department will never see who in the department has, not sleeping good, or their health is not being maintained, or they went on or had some real problems with certain calls. We're not sharing that. The department sees aggregate. They see that, okay, overall, the health of our department is increased, it's decreased, it's remained stable. There's that sort of feedback. But this is a system that is solely built to help the officer. And the most important thing that we could do is assure them that only they see their data. And so it's all, when I say voluntary, I mean, it's voluntary in the sense that they give their biometrics and stuff. Of course, the CAD data is, the agency can see that already, but even the agency doesn't see our weighting of that and our correlations against the other variables we're doing with that. That's all behind the scenes. And the data is in fact pushed to the officer, not through an app, it's pushed through their text. So they get a text when there's something to pay attention to or to be aware of, or something to help them out with. They might have just experienced a series of events. Let's say, as I used to be back in the day, sexual assault investigator, I would go out to these sort of emergent scenes, and my sergeant would never know that I had had 3 of those in 3 weeks. They're just not paying attention to that. They're not seeing the longitudinal sort of data points there. They know that I just went on one, and who knows, they might be smart enough to, with 12 officers, realize, oh, I think Bair's actually done a couple of these lately, or even other significant calls, maybe not those, but maybe like a drowning child call, or 963, or a accident fatality, which can be really traumatizing. And so if we'd had a couple of those across our shifts, or even just a death investigation, just a dead body, those can also be somewhat traumatic. That if those had sort of been throughout my last 2 weeks, I, as an officer, frankly, never paid attention to that, because every day was a new day for me. And at the end of the day, I was just trying to forget the previous shift and day. So, but what we can do is we can ping them to say, hey, look, you've kind of had some rough calls lately, and we happen to have noticed that your sleep has been declining and that your heart rate variability has been a little bit off. You might want to consider X, Y, and Z, or here's some department resources that are available to you that you might be able to take advantage of. And we'll even go so far as to text them the links, the numbers. So it's that sort of thing that has made it to where I think they see the intent of the system. They know that, again, it's the data's in our system, so it's not sitting in the agency's system, so we have control of it. And they've been very open with the data. So all good so far.
All right. So, and then how many agencies are currently using the system, or do you go by a sworn officer? What's your metric there?
Yeah, hundreds of sworn officers, but we're just getting going. I mean, we've literally just launched this year, so we've got about a dozen agencies so far. But hopefully, when you talk to me next in 2 or 3 years, we'll be up at that 1,000 plus or something. But yeah, we're just getting going, and as most startups, and also with just the speed at which, I'll even say, we use a lot of AI in our development. So it's, of course, in the platform itself, but we also leverage it in our day-to-day workloads. And it's made it much easier for us to be able to produce much faster So back in the day, I'd be banging on the keyboard in my basement on Attack Workstation, trying to get Jason Elder the newest, thing that's going to help him do crime analysis faster. Now we're able to even get that out, those sorts of functions and features and capabilities out a lot faster. And so we're sort of building the plane as we're taking off, but there's some really cool things that we're going to be able to do.
Yeah. Well, what was your saying? If you wait until you love your first draft, you waited too long.
Yeah, that's not my saying. I think he was a Netflix guy. Shoot, I forget his name. I think it was Neil something. But anyway, yeah, he said if you don't hate your first version, you've waited too long to release.
Yeah.
And it's true. And I hate our first version. So that's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah. Well, this has a lot of potential, obviously. I mean, you may be saving lives in the long run, lowering costs, and just bringing awareness to an epidemic, as you mentioned. So kudos to you and your team.
Thank you. And I think we have people who see that it has potential because we've got some substantial funding to get going and to get this off the ground, and some really good backers and supporters. So yeah, I think the country's starting to come around to supporting and loving law enforcement as they should. So I'm glad it's kind of come back to that now.
All right.
It was rough there for a couple of years.
Yeah. All right, let's move on then, because you also are writing a book on AI. AI and policing is at least the current title as you're getting ready to put the finishing touches on this book. So just how did this book come to be, and what should we expect?
It came out of, I think, the need to demystify a lot of it, because I think that those who have been sort of doing AI, or at least the components of it, they've seen that, okay, this is not exactly the newest. This isn't some new invention. This has been around. Now, compute power has gotten us to where we are. That's what's really been the hockey stick for AI, is our ability to now have the computing power to do what we had always envisioned to do. We just couldn't do it because the technology existed from a mathematical perspective, from a structural perspective, from a procedural perspective, but we didn't have the bandwidth to actually manage all of this. And now we do with the technology. So I think what the purpose of the book is to, as I say, demystify a lot of this, to say, look, you've been doing this. We've been doing license plate recognition. We've been doing facial recognition. We've been doing things in Attack Workstation and ArcGIS and others that have components or capabilities that fall under the umbrella of artificial intelligence, and to help agencies understand how it can benefit their agency and where they don't need it. So it's also a purpose to say, hey, look, you don't just have to go get it because it's now available and everybody's talking about it. But here is where, in fact, it might be able to help your department out, whether you're an analyst or a dispatcher, or an officer, a chief. I sort of try and do the best I can to touch on all of it and talk about what the different areas are in AI and which ones are really proven to be useful and which ones are maybe still a little not fully baked.
You talked about the computing power. I sat through a lecture last year on AI, and the presenter described it as, it's a little bit of a black box or the dark side of the moon type of thing. And like, if I was to try to go through and double check all the calculations and everything, it might take me like 70 years to go through this. And so I think that's one of the things that brings, especially in law enforcement, some uneasiness, because, well, wait a minute, how do you know the data's right that you're getting, or how can we know for sure, or how can I be comfortable moving forward with the information that I'm getting out of this if somebody can't double check and prove all the calculations?
100%. I never met too many people in public safety who were able to do spherical calculations of distance, and yet they still trust ArcGIS distance feature. So did they get the curvature of the Earth right? So we trust our systems, and of course you can truth them. There's a lot of that. So instead of us going out and trying to figure out how ChatGPT works, you yourself can actually do that. You can take your own little large language model, you can fill it with some content, you can begin to see asking questions, how it turns those questions into vectors, numbers. You could then see visually in 3 dimensions how the content that you've loaded in is relatable based on the data, where the word cat exists, where the word dog exists, where the word collar exists in relation to both cat and dog, or how far it is away from pig. And so you can do these sorts of things and see, oh, I get it. I kind of see what it's doing. But yeah, to in fact then go do the vector math, you're not going to do that. But I think you can get a basic understanding. Nobody on this, I can almost guarantee that nobody on your podcast today, and this is not just because of the podcast listeners, this is the state of the world, knows really how an internal combustion engine works anymore, and could describe, how the sort of the brain, the controller of our cars, makes the ignition go and fire at the rate it does and when it does it and how it balances air and fuel. They just trust that it's going to work. And so, yeah, AI is a little bit of the same stuff too.
I think it's also comes down to what you're asking it to do. I know when I use ChatGPT, I might be asking about help me with a SQL statement or help me with an Excel function. It's usually something that I'm having problems with. I'm trying to figure out how to manipulate the data.
Yeah.
So whatever it tells me, I'm then testing right away. I'm like, okay, well, what they're asking me, that code or that procedure, does that work? Oh yeah, it does. Then I'm good to go. So I'm actually testing what it's telling me right away because I'm asking for suggestions.
Yeah. There's the funny thing about ChatGPT and Claude or Grok or whatever your flavor that you like of AI, and they all have their sort of strengths and weaknesses. I think what a lot of people don't realize, this might be one of the things that I can contribute today on this call, is they might upload a long document. They're like, I don't want to read this stupid book, or I don't want to do this. Just tell me what it's about. And they upload it and they think that the entire book has been ingested or it's ready to go. They start asking questions. And so they don't understand the whole token limits. And that's where it starts to get interesting because it'll still work. It doesn't tell you, hey, look, because of the token limits, I wasn't able to ingest actually this entire document, all these call for service, all these police reports. It just stopped. And so when you ask a question, it may not have the amount of sort of memory and tokens to spend to give you the most accurate answer. So that's where it gets interesting. You kind of do have to know a little bit about that aspect of it. But I will tell you the most fascinating thing, as you mentioned, like using it as an analyst or as an officer, that it's in the book, and I'll tell you it so you can skip this chapter when you get to it. One of the things that I had done was testing the various platforms that are out there and how they might have applications and utility in public safety. One of the things that I actually wrote about in a previous book was this officer Kearney. And he had noticed, being a fellow southpaw like myself, a left-hander, he had noticed a burglary scene and the window that was the screen for the window was cut. He had noticed a C. So when the individual cut the screen, they did it in the shape of a C, the letter C. Mm-hmm. And he stared at it for a minute. He thought, I don't think a right-hander would have cut like that. That screen cut in the C form would be natural for me. And you're probably right now, Jason and others who are listening, thinking, okay, I'm a righty. Yeah, I would go from top to the right and then back around. You would do a backward C is what you would do if you were doing that. And so he surmised that, wow, this must be a left-hander. And sure enough, they eventually caught him and the guy was left-handed. But to be able to reduce your investigative pool from 100% of the population to, well, only 7 to 10% of the population was left-handed. So that dramatically reduces your investigative pool. So that in itself was, I think, a fascinating idea of just investigative kung fu Sherlock Holmes-ness. But here's where it got interesting. I took a picture of a screen cut in the shape of I just described, the C, and I gave it to ChatGPT with his vision capabilities. And cut to the chase here, it discovered, or it told me, this most likely is a left-handed burglar. And I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, wait a minute. How did you see the sea and make that mental leap that this was a southpaw that did this? And I couldn't believe it. And I thought, well, no, it's gobbled the internet. It knows everything about everything. So somewhere it might have put into its math, it's the vectors, this passage out of Tactical Crime Analysis, Research to Investigation, the previous book. It might have put something in there and it was pulling it from that. And then the more I prompted it, the more I realized there are whole, of course, psychological studies and books and materials that exist about handedness and how people write and the slantedness and so on and so forth. Because then when I prompted it to say, like, where did you get that from? That's bizarre. It didn't say, oh, you wrote about this in chapter 12 of this other book. It actually said, well, the research shows that handedness slants and it inferred that. And at that point, I'm like, all right, this actually could be really helpful to public safety. And there's some other examples that I've written about in the book where I've tested it in that way. But think about that, Jason, that you could literally upload the photos from a crime scene and have it potentially provide some insight that you might not have thought about and maybe unlock some new direction in the investigation. That's pretty powerful stuff. Of course, there'll be people on the call who say, wait a minute, you're uploading crime scene photos to ChatGPT. Yeah, but you can also, I don't know if people are aware of this, but you can also get your own ChatGPT. These language models that exist that have trillions of tokens in them, they're gigantic, they have a lot of data. You could, in fact, download those to your own desktop computer nowadays. You can get a desktop and even I think it's an M5 chip from Apple. You can get machines that can have your own in-house ChatGPT with the same level of data that it's using.
Yeah,
That's
I think a lot
spooky.
of companies are doing that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So-
It's not that hard. I mean, it's not that big a deal. It's a couple terabytes, but so what? I mean, most people have a couple terabytes nowadays on their computer.
Yeah, floppy disk.
Back in the Bair days, here's your
One
free,
meg.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what size that was. It wasn't the floppy. It was the one right after the floppy. It was the little like 3x5 or something.
Yeah. I think that was like, I think I had one that was 2 megs and it was.
Yeah, those were the days. So yeah, it's cool stuff.
Yeah. So no, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of some of the dangers if the sourcing of the information and if it doesn't have all the information, right? Because as analysts, if you don't have all the information to do any kind of analysis or forecasting or anything else, you lose that capability for accuracy. So I think it's the combination of what are you asking it to do and what's the source of the information. Because obviously if I ask it what was the crime trends in Utah, it's obviously going to go out there and use a source. And if it uses a source that defines crime differently from what I'm expecting, I'm not going to get the answer that I want.
Yeah. And there's ways around that. I mean, certain platforms like Perplexity, they do a good job at actually providing you the citation. So that's the sort of when I use it for those purposes where I want to validate the response, I'm usually asking for the citation so I could go validate it. It's really what I'm doing. Yeah. It's just another tool. Honestly, it's no different back in the day when I was first an analyst or even an intern, and we had the idea of putting X's and O's in the what was called HP desk, because email hadn't even been invented at that point, but we had an internal email system. We were making PIN maps with ASCII characters. We had drawn the city of Tempe in ASCII characters and then used zeros and X's to put crime points so that an officer or a person seeing this early email could visualize where those were at. It's no different from taking and going from that to ArcGIS and then Google Earth and then all the other cool things we have now. This is just another tool for analysts to be even more powerful than they already are.
Hi, everyone. This is data scientist Andrew Wheeler. For my PSA is if you ever think to yourself, can't you use AI to do that? Just stop right there and don't say that sentence. I know that that's more for the managers and the crime analysts out there, but every single time somebody has come to me with, well, can't you use AI to solve that? It's never a good question to actually use any type of even not AI solution. So you need to think about what you actually want before you utter that sentence.
Hi, I'm Kyle Stoker, and I'm encouraging you to vote in the IACA elections. You have the opportunity to vote for your candidate. So make sure you go to the IACA website and vote, because our membership has a voice in who leads the organization, and you want to make sure that your voice is heard. Thank you very much.
Well, I do want to talk a little bit about analysis and AI, but before I do, you're also a professor and you're adjunct professor and so you've been teaching now for a little bit, and it got me thinking as a professor, like, what is your take on students and using AI in terms of writing or the assignments?
Yeah, I'll answer that the same way that I just sort of concluded the last section there, which is it's a force multiplier. So when ArcGIS came out, it was a tool that I could become more efficient, more effective. I could do deeper analysis faster, glean newer insights based on this capability. And nobody ever accused me of, well, in the good old days when I used to push the pin in the map on the wall, I knew what was going on, and that's how you should do it. No, this is just as an analyst would leverage this technology to be more efficient and effective, so too should the student. And so I've been teaching now in various capacities. I've been doing it for about 20 years. I've taught classes up at British Columbia Institute of Technology, one of my favorite universities to teach for. Amazing forensic science program up there. I got opportunities to teach about crime analysis there to unbelievably wicked smart professionals, and done some other things. But Brigham Young University, BYU, go Cougs, is nice. A special place, and they have really smart students there. And so, like I said, 5 years. So 5 years ago, they didn't have access to these technologies like we do right now at our fingertips. You could code some of them, but who's doing that? And so not really a problem, or even, of course, we mentioned, but fast forward 3 years ago when ChatGPT just first became commercialized and sort of the world could ask it questions, academia kind of freaked out. It was like, wait a minute here, you have to push the pen in the map. If I had to push the pen in the map, this is how you gotta pay your dues. And so that's not my perspective. My perspective is they better use AI in my classroom. So I'm looking for opportunities to not only just introduce, but in every single lesson I have, I'm trying to get them to see how that might be applicable or not applicable to what it is they're trying to do. And I will tell you, the lessons that I taught 5 years ago, I would teach them how to do a net promoter score. I would walk them through Porter's 5 forces, or different strategic frameworks that business people use to make sense of the business environment, the industry, their company. Many of those frameworks that we would show them, look, here's how you do this. You got to calculate this and do that, and you got to grab this, and that's going to come from here, and this is how you do all this. It can now be done with AI. So it would be a disservice for me as a professor trying to set them up for success in business to not show them now how it's done with the technology. And just because it could be done and I have to revise my curriculum because they can literally just drop it in there and have it do it is a great thing. Because to talk about academia here and the Bloom's taxonomy, the hierarchy, the pyramid of where we want to get them, we want to get them to creativity, to synthesis of sort of ideas and insights. We don't want to have them stay at the base of the Bloom's taxonomy, which is just rote regurgitation of facts and memorization. We want to get them analyzing and synthesizing and creating. And if you can eliminate a lot of the lower tiers in the taxonomy, because now the technology has allowed us to move through those faster, I don't have to memorize chi-square calculation like I did when I was an analyst. I think we talked about this on one of the podcasts. that this is sort of a snapshot of where we've come. When I was an intern trying to become an analyst and I was applying for the crime analyst job in Tempe, Arizona, the Tempe Police Department, the test was you had to do all these things, one of which was do chi-square by hand. That's not all that easy to do. You gotta know what you're doing, right? And a little old justice studies degree, I wasn't a math guy, so I had to figure that out. And I learned from Rachel Boba, all right, how do we do this again? Because she was a stats PhD. So she walked me through it and I understood it in the whole 9 yards. But yeah, so the concept of how it's done. But is there an analyst in the world right now who's doing chi-square by hand? I hope not. No. So those sorts of things are all done through these advancements. And so what I'm trying to do is they advance quicker through the business curriculum to where we can now start really getting deep into the analytical, the again, creative, these ideation areas where we let the technology do the work and the brunt of it. But what we can do is use the results to innovate and create. So that's what it's making. It's making the classroom, well, first of all, it's actually making it difficult as a professor because truthfully, the last thing a professor wants to do is every single semester change their curriculum, right? Change their syllabus. Because once you get it down, it takes, as you've taught too, it takes a lot of work to develop a class and to have it work in 16 weeks and what they're going to learn and how they're going to be the content mastery, all that. What's interesting is that because AI is advancing so quickly, it is absolutely exponential at this point. We don't know what's next. And every single semester for the last 3 years, I have had to basically redo my class to accommodate the newest ways that they would learn and be taught. So yeah, kind of wild. But so here's the thing. For those who don't know AI, they can easily be caught out if they're using it and not learning with it. So if part of it is, look, I want you to write a personal strategic assessment to see where you're at in the world, what resources you have available to you, what capabilities you possess, your knowledge, skills, ability. And with that, I want you to see if there's any opportunities for growth, any blind spots you might have, so that as you augment yourself to make yourself more capable and thus desirable by a company in hiring, I need you to write that. Well, that's kind of personal. And if they were to try and ChatGPT that, that's not probably going to come out right because the professor will be able to see right through that well, this isn't you. That's not what your skills are. That's not what you're trying to do. This wasn't really reflective of where you're at and your understanding. So I'm trying to, and I think other professors are too, trying to get it to where you're asking a lot more questions that might involve their sort of state of where they're at, again, with their knowledge or their skill set or their activities that they're doing. That's where you can begin to get at the call out when it's being used improperly. And a lot of people don't know too that when you just copy and paste from ChatGPT, there's hidden characters that are in the text. Nobody really knows that, but you can use tools to recover those hidden characters. One of the most obvious ones that just baffles me that people don't remove this, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, but it's called the M dash. It's EM and then dash. And ChatGPT loves it. Claude's a big fan of it as well. So if you just use either of those to write for you, for whatever reason, it just loves to be able to put that double dash in there for you. And most people are not taught to write that way. So anybody who has those and they're writing, immediately I'm already suspect or suspicious of, did you really write this? Because it's even difficult to get the M dash in Microsoft Word or Google Docs. You got to kind of know what you're doing. So that in itself is a dead giveaway. But yeah, there's special hidden characters.
Yeah, I did notice it is dash heavy. I didn't know what that particular was called, but I have noticed that. So I guess from your perspective, if a student turned in a paper and stated at the end of it, I wrote a draft and this was edited by ChatGPT, would that be acceptable?
100% for me.
Yeah.
100%. I hope they use it. Why wouldn't you use it? Do you use spell checker when you write in Google, right? I mean, you use the tool to get the best product you can get. The trick is that you want to make sure they're actually learning. And true mastery of a subject or learning is when you do begin to get to that creative phase and you get to the synthesis phase. You know him very well, and one of my favorite people is Dan Helms. Dan was very smart about that kind of stuff, and you would see him be able to do this quite a bit. And one of the things everybody knows just from Dan Helms' lore is that he discovered this because he was looking for what smart people do is they find parallels in other industries and disciplines. So if you're just myopic with your discipline, how are you gonna grow beyond it? So what you do is, like my example of the left-hander, ChatGPT was able to see outside the discipline of crime analysis, the discipline of investigations, and use other research and knowledge from psychological writings and findings to see that the slant in things that are produced by one's hand give insight into handedness. So what Dan was trying to do when he was trying to use arc view back in the day to come up with different ways to make arc view do better at prediction, he's like, well, who else is doing prediction? And he thought long and hard about it. He started doing some research, and he found that the biology discipline was very good at using arc view to study animal movements. And so because we were putting that thing all over the place back in the day at CMAP, the arc view animal movement extension was a great extension. And all it was is math, but it's looking to other areas and finding parallels and corollaries that can help us sort of do those things that make us better. And I guess that's what I'll say is the hope is that the classroom is even more robust as a result of ChatGPT, not dummied down because the work's being done for them. They're actually thinking deeper and reasoning more and becoming more creative and ideating and innovating. It's become really good, almost with some of that too, because again, case in point, when I asked it about the screen cut, I probably should have thought it, but I didn't at the time. I wasn't thinking the psychological sort of discipline of having that knowledge base that could have provided me insights. That was just one of those things where, oh yeah, Officer Kearney told me that, and I get that. That makes sense. Yeah, handedness. So yeah, that's where we're at in academia right now. And I'm having to redo for this coming fall semester too.
Keeps you on your toes, right?
Yep.
So I think there's a good segue into analysis and AI, because I feel I always find it funny since as long as I can remember, and even way back in studying the past of law enforcement analysis, it's always been this idea that the computer is going to replace the analyst, and AI is not really any different in that respect, but it's certainly something that can go hand in hand and not be one or the other. But I do feel for the analyst, it can take away certain remedial tasks that may weigh you down and get you away from the analysis. So it's like I was talking about writing the code. Like I'm not spending time writing that perfect code. It can help me streamline that, get the code, so then I can get the data to actually do the analysis.
100%. I mean, it's like I say earlier on, it's a force multiplier. It should be. They should be leveraging it in all of their daily tasks, even going so far as to help them sort through their email or write a better memo to the chief's office, have it review their work to see that it's accurate. There's times that many of the chapters in the book, I take them and I drop them into Claude and I say, hey, here's the audience, here's what I want you to be able to do. And is there anything that makes sense, or where have I not consistently adhered to my theme? It's been my partner in writing. It's been my partner in creating content for students. It's been my business companion to bounce ideas off of. Because again, it has the vastness of the internet there. I want to say quote unquote bunny ear internet. It has the vastness of all that to be able to pull from and to draw from and regurgitate it back to me, so that I can then take that and be like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. And it gives me different ways to approach an idea or to go down a path. So I think analysts should embrace it and love it. And just like they did ArcGIS, just like they did SAS or SPSS, it's just going to be an awesome tool for them to be even better.
Yeah.
It's not going to replace them.
It's not going to replace them. I do feel though that it'll do stuff that the analysts may really enjoy doing. Maybe they enjoy doing the graphic design or doing the PowerPoint or whatever the task may be to finish the project. And this is something that you could very easily, I don't have to spend so much time on graphic design or laying out the perfect PowerPoint or whatnot. Like a lot of this stuff can be done for me.
Yeah. Although I would say that it's been pretty good when it's come to creative things, visual things like helping to structure a PowerPoint, and then I do the refinements. Or it gives me the first draft of it, which is usually the hardest thing to do, is just get your first square on the piece of paper. And then me say, okay, look, I like this color palette. Here's a hex code to use. Find complementary colors. Here, I want this. And you begin to, you almost become an orchestrator versus a player in the orchestra. You're not just strumming the one instrument now as a cellist or a bassoonist or whatever the different positions are in an orchestra. You are the conductor. You have all of these now, and you are orchestrating it to make beautiful music is what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And we talked about the black box earlier. I also feel that there is so much data now that it's almost impossible for an analyst to keep up with all the different data sources and all the different ways that they can search through data and try to have a full picture or have all the information. That it's going to become necessary because there is so much data out there that they can't possibly keep. One person can't keep up with all the data.
There's no way. I mean, even the most smallish agency, if you start taking into consideration CAD, records management offense data, you maybe have additional follow-on investigative data you can get access to. You got workload data. You've got, if you even think about if you wanted to really do a good job at administrative crime analysis, and I'm going to do good beat redistricting and resource allocation, well, we would do that with data that we could manage. And so we'd probably stick with call for service and maybe one or two other variables that we could bring in. But if you can think about it, if we could bring in other variables and allow the computer and the AI to do what it can do, we could do better work. So I could then bring in maybe the GPS routing from the patrol cars and idle time and speeds and distance and calculations to from dispatch to arrival routes and all that kind of good stuff. You could really do some cool things that might make you even more accurate with those outcomes. So the hope is that, you just begin to discover other data, or I should say you begin to use it to incorporate other data. But I will say you could even get it to help you discover and make data based on combining sources and inputs to give me something new, right? So that could be something very beneficial.
Yeah. We talked about earlier about businesses bringing in their own AI. Do you know if any police departments are doing that?
I do, actually. There are a few in our sort of efforts that we've discovered that they have done their own internal large language model with their own internal chat. If you think about that, if back in my day, I used to have with me in my beat bag, the bag that I would take out to my patrol car, and it would sit in my front seat, and I would obviously be driving it around. That bag was filled with stuff to make me be a better cop and have resources. Two of those items were 2 3-inch binders, those binders. Both those binders, one being the policies and the other one being the procedures. Well, now I don't have to carry that around. Back in the day, I would have had to have thumbed through that to find out what our policy was for X, Y, and Z, or impounding this or handcuffing this type of situation. And so now that's just at their fingertips. So yes, they're using it to be able to enable the department officers, analysts, dispatchers to get information quicker with more accuracy. And so that's some of the utility of it right now. More retrieval, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. There might not be any more silos in our data.
There might not be. Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. It is wild.
All right, I want to finish up here because it's been 10 years since you sold Bair Analytics, and I didn't believe it when I was prepping today. I was like, when did that sale go through? I would have guessed that it was like 6 years ago. I had no idea that it was 10. It's obviously a different perspective that you may have now. So looking back at it, what are some thoughts that come to mind?
Yeah, 10 years. I'm with you on that. It does seem like a blink of an eye, but as we get older, time shortens, it quickens. It was April 2nd, 10 years ago. So in April 2nd, I just think a funny day to sell on because they wanted to do it on the first of the month. And I said, there's no way I'm selling my company on April Fool's Day. So that's why it's always April 2nd. So it was April 2nd that we sold 10 years ago. And they've done amazing things with what we had started. They've got it to thousands of agencies now. My only bummer is that they have since retired Attack Workstation. It's just too difficult to maintain that and the code base, 1 million lines of code and all that. It got to be quite a bit. And it just sometimes you got to go with the products that are in demand. So that's my only sort of bummer about it. Having said that, I will tell you that I use Attack Workstation myself still for analytics, certain things. In fact, I even had it up last week. And it's funny because Mark Dobbs, who works with Sworn now, Mark Dobbs used to be at Bair Analytics and then went on to Walmart, was director of analytics at Walmart. He's back now with the crew, and we're working together. And he's at Sworn. He's the director of analytics here. He sent me a screenshot saying, yeah, we want to be able to do this in Sworn. And it was a picture out of Attack. And I thought, oh, that's good job on that one. But 10 years, the profession it hasn't really changed, to be completely blunt. It's still got the same amazing people in it. It still has vendors that I know and I built strong relationships with. There are still people who, when I left, are still in patrol or now supervisors or still at the department. And it's cool. I love being back in, trying to provide them technologies that help them do their jobs better, but also now might have an impact on them personally, and trying to help my brothers and sisters in blue. It's also neat too, because as we begin to reintroduce ourselves, or I guess reacquainted with public safety, which really hadn't, like I said, been that different when I got back in. One of the people that is a part of Sworn is Andrew McCormick. And Andrew was an officer in Tempe, Arizona with me back in the day. And he just retired after 27 years, got on to SWAT and has like really interesting, just a stellar career. And so he's now working alongside us in Sworn. One of the neat things is, though, that he and I both started the academy in the same academy class. So here we were 27, 28 years ago, starting the academy together and totally trying to figure that out back then. And here we are today, both working together again. If we were to go back to the early days, him 1 Lincoln 20, me 1 Lincoln 19, and we're trying to do good. And so it's cool to be back together and doing good with these people that I had chances to do that with in the past. So yeah, 10 years, but it's all good, and it's just a number.
Yeah. Well, I was even thinking it's been 5 years since we published the Sean Bair's Guide to Hiring a Law Enforcement Analyst. It was about 5 years around this time that we were recording the session. So
that's crazy to me. That seems like it was 2 years ago, dude.
But yeah, and so for our listeners, I'll put a link into the show notes for all this stuff so you can get more information, including the hiring guide.
Yeah.
Sean, I'll just wanted to finish up with just maybe what's next in terms of AI and law enforcement analysis, and maybe something that people can be on the lookout for in the next 5 years, studying up now in terms of AI.
I'll tell you, I wish I could be that guy who would say, here's what you need to do, and here's what's coming, and mark my words, it's going to do this. 20 years ago, we could do that. There's Moore's Law, the famous sort of tenet of technology was you could expect it to double about every 18 months. And so you could make predictions about, well, where will we be in about 2 years? Well, you look at what the technology is. The technology doubles about every 18 months. So if we're at this kind of capability right now, what would it be 18 months, 2 years from now? And you can begin to guess at those things. Oh, I think we'll have this, or I think we'll have that. We can't solve this now because we don't have the computational power, but we will, and then we'll be able to solve it. But where we're at now, Moore's law is no longer valid. It really isn't, because now it's hockey sticked, it's exponential. If you just think about where we were 2 to 3 simple years ago and where we're at today, it's nuts. I mean, students and individuals who are wanting to learn coding, let's say, and entering college 4 years ago, 5 years ago, AI wasn't even a mention. It wasn't a part of the curriculum. And now they're coming out and they're using it, their day-to-day coding. And it's doing a large portion of their coding. Now, when they enter into college, they don't even know if they're going to have a job as a computer programmer 4 years from now because of the advancements. It's literally going to be able to do that, I think, very soon. So I think you're going to see a lot more code being written by literally anybody. Like anybody can use spell checker. Anybody's going to be able to use coding to build whatever they want to build solutions that help them be better. I think that's where we'll be able to go, is that I think people that want to be able to have something happen for them, they won't look first to a commercial solution. They'll look first to, well, I'll just build it because it's only going to take me an hour. I'll just have my AI bot do it. Or the robot who's mowing my lawn right now, I'll have them come in and code it for me. Yeah, I think we're going to see Jarvis before you know it. I've been trying to build, and that was part of the thing that I was doing with this, writing this book, is unfortunately, because of the advancements over the last year and a half, 2 years that I've tried to write this book, I've had to rewrite so much because it changes so fast. I'm at the point now where it's like, I just got to get this book out, because by the time I get it out, it's already going to be out of date. So I think we're going to see that, where you can't predict what's going to be 3 months from now, because 3 months ago, you wouldn't have imagined that we would have videos that would be created that you couldn't tell the difference between real and fake. And here we are. All
right, Sean. Hey, it was great catching up with you. Thank you so much for your insight and catching us up today. And the best of luck with SwornAI and on the book.
You're awesome. I appreciate you and all that you're doing for the profession. Thank you for catching up with me. And I think we need to revise that hiring guide now that you said that, because we need to incorporate AI into that. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.